I was studying with Jagadish Kashyap. He was a very eminent Indian Buddhist monk, a very great scholar. And I was studying with him Dharma, which is, in a way, Buddhist philosophy, and also logic. And I spent many happy months studying with him. I stayed with Kashyapji in his hermitage, where he lived more or less on his own. One day Kashyapji decided that he'd had enough of working as a professor in the university, so he suggested we went and had a pilgrimage in Bihar, pilgrimage to the Buddhist holy places, and then he said we'd go up to a hill station called Kalimpong. But it was very different from any town in the plains. It seemed a much happier, livelier, more colourful place.
Kalimpong. So we better knock on the door. We're disciples of Sangharakshita.
Yes. We have come from where?
We've come from different places, from New Zealand, from England, and from Bodh Gaya.
I see. We have come here just to see the place where the Bhikkhu Sangharakshita has stayed.
That's right, yes.
I see. And here is the picture. Here in this picture you will find Sangharakshita.
Aha. Oh, so he is back. Wow.
He stayed here for a few years. Most probably 51 or 52 years.
Mm-hmm. This is the bedroom that Bhante slept in when he was here in the Dhamma Vihara, as it was then called.
He started preaching, he started teaching English, and the young boys, they used to come to his place to learn English. He opened the branch of the Mahabodhi Society here.
You cut it up in the forest, and they chop it into little squares of meat. And then what they do traditionally is they wrap it up in leaves, just that they get people to stop it because of its healing properties. Very, very strong healing properties.
Now, who is there? I don't know. He had discovered that leaves, and then he started the treatment of what we call this for fracture,
broken bones.
This is the, he was previously monk. His name was this Mahapragya.
Mahapragya.
Yeah, Mahapragya. Then after that he went back again to Sharanatha. Then most probably he didn't come again. He didn't come back.
And that's the stairs where all Bhante's belongings were thrown down the bottom of the stairs. It's where he learned that he had been turfed out of the Dhamma Vihara. And this is where Burma Raja came and rescued Bhante and took him up the hill to Panorama.
pilgrimage reminds one of the Buddha and his original disciples. And even now, in some ways, India is not so different, especially village India, from what it was like in the time of the Buddha. One can find the same little villages, the same mud huts, the same village well, the same lotus pond. And sometimes if one sort of was to close one's eyes, one could very easily imagine the Buddha, just coming round the corner of one of these little huts on his begging round. So pilgrimage of this sort can give one a more vivid sense of the Buddha and of the fact that he was actually a living human being and not a myth or a legend, even though legendary elements may have crept later into the story of his life.
This is where Lama Govinda became a Tibetan Buddhist, because he started off as a Theravadan. He came up here to Darjeeling to a conference, hoping to convert some of the Tibetans to the Theravada, and he got snowed in at this monastery. And slowly the atmosphere, the spirituality of the place really had a very powerful effect on him. And it was he who got converted to the Mahayana by this place. The first Tomageshe Rinpoche did his one of his retreats here. This is when Lama Govinda was staying down here. Tomageshe Rinpoche was up here. He began to feel the Rinpoche's presence. It's quite an important place for Western Buddhism, I think, for the transmission of Buddhism into the West. It's a pity it's in such a bad state. And really this monastery has got such a strong connection with Western Buddhism through Lama Govinda, who made it famous in his book The Way of the White Clouds. So this is the hermitage that Bhante stayed in, and it's been fixed up now. It's a guest house.
room in the garden.
This is the meditation room, Bhante's shrine room. This is where he came back from one visit with Lama Govinda and found the gold statue of the Buddha that Dharma Rinpoche had blessed. So I believe this is Bhante's room when he stayed here, in this room. This was where the famous ping pong table was, and Bhante describes that the room was just big enough to fit the ping pong table, and you could squeeze down either side, and it's true. And this chapter in Sign of the Golden Wheel, he describes how on one Wesak everybody just kept bringing gardenias until the whole place was filled with those flowers and their scent. Bhante wrote a lot of poetry, of course, here, and articles, and towards the end of his stay here, this is when he began the survey. But this is also the room where Lama Govinda, Lee Gotami came, and Lee Gotami showed her drawings that she'd done from the expedition to the west of Tibet. So this is a stupa in memory of Lama Govinda and Lee Gotami. Interesting to see that Lama Govinda founded the Siksha Parichar Sangha in Darjeeling 1933. Quite a long time ago. He would have in fact only been 35 years old.
Sangharakshita.
So this is Chital Sangye Dorje's monastery. It's one of Bhante's teachers, and this is also one of Bhante's teachers. Dorje Rinpoche, who's the head of the Nyingma, and he's also a teacher of Chital Sangye Dorje.
Yeah.
To me, Chital Sangye Dorje is important because he's a bit outside the tradition. He's not recognized as the tulku of any great previous person. He is just somebody who emerged in the same way that Bhante is not recognized as anybody that he emerged. This is His Holiness Dalai Lama, and behind on the wall is
Kempo Ngakarimbuche.
Kempo.
Jata Sangjen to the Guru.
In the same way, I believe that there are other Buddhist teachers, and some of them are teaching Buddhism, or they're all teaching Buddhism, but some of them. Bhante was looking for some permanent base in Kalimpong, and one day Chital Rinpoche just told him, yes, you're going to get a place. And he wrote out this poem in Tibetan, and he said you should call it this name, the Triyana Vardhana Vihara. the place where the three yanas, Hinayana, Mahayana and Vajrayana, where they're practiced. Well, and that was very much in what Bhante wanted to do, is to practice the Dharma as a whole, not just one school, not just one path. So he would have come here in 57, that's when he got the place. Many of his teachers came and stayed here with him, and many friends came and stayed here. This is where Kantapalo came and stayed, and Kachu Rinpoche. Whenever he came to Kalimpong, he stayed with Bhante in this house. He finished the survey here. He wrote, quite a lot of the Rainbow Road was written here, and the Eternal Legacy, quite a bit I think of the Three Jewels was written here, and many other articles and lots of poetry.
आपको हिंदी आती है? आती है। कब से आप यहाँ पे हो? आप क्रिश्चियन हो? क्रिश्चियन है। His name is Jen. He's Christian.
He's in the lion's den.
आपसे ये कह रहे हैं कि आप शेर के गुफा में रहते हैं।
You have to pull out that thorn. You stayed here with Bhante, yes?
Of course, I just stayed with Bhante here.
How old were you?
It was in 59, maybe I was about 18 years old.
18?
18.
Yeah.
Well, Bhante was also, as I say, he was quite young. And this space, in fact, those days was not cemented. It was a wooden floor here. And this room, see this, it has come outside, it is not here. So this is the wooden floor. The Bhante used to pace the floor most of the time up and down.
Up and down.
Yeah, but maybe he was meditating or thinking something, some materials for his writing work. And often he used to get inside and he used to sit on that old typewriter,
He had some Tibetan teachers?
Of course he had. He often used to visit the Tibetan teachers of those days, and they also used to come over here. The other Rinpoche could never speak a word of English, and Sangharakshita didn't know how to speak a word of Tibetan. But he had some boys working over here, and those boys, they were Tibetan boys, and they were not good in English, but still could manage to express what the other Rinpoche was saying in those days. So that way maybe something, and he often used to visit the Tibetan teachers of those days, and they also used to come over here.
Bhante stayed here for 7 years, and it is in fact at this place that Kachu Rinpoche gave Bhante the Padmasambhava initiation, and gave him the name Urgyen. And that's how he got the name Urgyen Sangharakshita. Of course, he was instructed to give Bhante that Padmasambhava initiation by Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche. In this little cottage here, called the Daichen Kangzang, which means the cottage of great bliss. In that cottage that Chital Sangye Dorje lived when he was in Kalimpong. And in this little cottage here, Bhante received the green Tara Abhisheka, which was the first of Bhante's tantric practices. And if you look by the door of this cottage, is one of the famous symbols of green Tara, the fully opened lotus, the partly open lotus, and the lotus bud.
That's her symbol, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe it looks like maybe they're going to fix it up. And there's some bags of cement, and they've pulled up the rotten floorboards, and maybe they're getting ready to rebuild it. Men are cremated lying down, and women are cremated standing up. And so that is the place where women were cremated. But that tradition has fallen in abeyance. The thing itself is a testimony to impermanence. maybe a child was
Yeah,
created
child,
there,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, because that's
child.
looking small. Yeah, that's
Yeah, the bones. Those are the bones, the spine, there's a rib cage.
This mountain is called Chumolari. Chumolari is the goddess mountain. Here are the pictures. This is the Sangharakshita. This is Tomogeshe. This is the present Prime Minister of Dalai Lama.
When was that? What year do you think?
Just before the Chinese attacked India, I think.
Did you know Dada Rinpoche? You must have.
Oh yes, he stayed, when he first came from Tibet, he stayed in our house.
Uh-huh.
This,
Your house was here?
The house that I gave to these Baroas, there.
Do you have any particular memories of Sangharakshita?
At those days, the foreigners were quite few, you know, and for someone like that to come and stay, yeah.
Well, here we are. This is Dada BCI. This is where Dada Rinpoche lived, and this is General Calder, Rinpoche's assistant and headmaster of ITBCI.
This is the Tandrum, just the altar, and he used to stay here right from morning to 11:30 or so. His two main gurus. This old Thanga, this is Tsongkhapa, very old Thanga. Rinpoche was abbot in Bodhgaya monastery till 63. He's also abbot of old Gum monastery. Then Dangdo went for delegation from the Buddhists. He met Sangharakshita there. Later on, Sangharakshita came to Kuala Lumpur, and there's a very, very close link with Rinpoche. In 1956, when this Buddha Jayanti, big celebrations held. So a lot of people came from Tibet and that time.
I think the basic value of it was that it reminded the Indian people of the Buddha and Buddhism, which of course had been largely forgotten for centuries. So the fact that the celebrations were sponsored by the central government and the various state governments meant that people could hardly ignore them, and they did serve very much to remind people about the Buddha, his life, his teaching, and so on. And of course, in that year, there took place Dr. Ambedkar's conversion to Buddhism, and along with him, nearly 500,000 of his followers. And that was a very big event indeed.
In Tibetan, this is called a Gyaltsen. It means a banner of victory. It's actually an ancient Indian thing which has survived in the Tibetan tradition. And it's usually erected above monasteries. And after Rinpoche died, I made this. The different order members sent shirts that they'd been ordained in, or special dresses. And this is a photo of the young Rinpoche, was many years ago now, and the handwriting is the Dalai Lama's blessing the new tulku. this is where Bhante used to come once a week for meditation instruction from Yogi Chen, LM Lodge. There's a very fascinating story of Mr. Chen that in the 60s, some people in California were taking LSD when they heard a voice. And that voice said, "Go to Kalimpong and meet Mr. Chen." And these hippies, tripping hippies, they'd never heard of Kalimpong. And apparently it happened to several people, and Mr. Chen found over the years 2 or 3 people turned up telling him this story, that they had been taking LSD and heard this voice. As a result of meeting these people, Mr. Chen produced a series of booklets, poems for hippies, and he also categorized all the sorts of different types of hippies, starting at the lowest form, which were plastic hippies, which were not really hippies at all, right up to the highest form of hippie, which is of course a Mahasiddha. So yes, this is the Dechen Choling, the Bhutanese monastery. Queen Mother of Bhutan, she some time ago, she gave this monastery to Dudjom Rinpoche, and now it preserves what's called the Dudjom Tersa, the new Terma tradition of Dudjom. You can see this, the refuge tree of the Dudjom Tersa. This is the Dudjom Rinpoche who was Bhante's teacher. Dudjom Rinpoche gave Bhante an initiation wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a cowboy hat with lots of money sticking out of his pocket. Right. Many different manifestations of Guru Rinpoche. Interestingly enough, here we also have Huan Song.
Oh, Huan
This is Huan Song with his backpack with the Dharma texts.
And this one.
Painted from the life of the Buddha, where the Buddha had interactions with gods.
Shankar.
Mahadev.
Yeah, Mahadev.
This is Shiva. Shivaji.
Oh yeah, how is it here?
Because Shivaji has become a disciple of the Buddha.
When?
At some point, Shiva has become absorbed into Buddhism.
So that's Shiva, of course.
And this is the shrine of the wrathful deities. Here we have, at the top of that refuge tree, this is Guru Rinpoche in the form of Vajrasattva. I believe this little cottage here is the little place that Dulga Khyentse Rinpoche stayed in when he escaped from Tibet and came to Kalimpong. At that time he was very, very poor and unknown, and he lived in this very little shack here. And this is where Bhante came and met him and received several different initiations, including Jambala, the god of wealth, and no surprise here, Kuru Kule, the goddess of fascination, and Hermitages, the Buddha of eternal life.
I used to go with a translator, and I'd find him sitting in the little front room on his bed, cross-legged, and always with a Tibetan book in his lap. And as I entered, he'd just look up and smile, and then we'd have some discussion. His wife would always bring Tibetan tea.
Should we go?
Yep.
Yes, this is where the relics of Sariputra and Moggallana stayed when in Darjeeling. Bhante had a strong connection with the people here.
या क्योंकि जो हमारे गुरु हैं मुर्गेन संरक्षित, उन्होंने पहली बार इस जगह पे उनको देखा था, और ये पहला जो उनका पहली बार इमेज देखा था मैंने।
Sangharakshita said that when he saw this image of Guru Rinpoche, he felt that it was deeply familiar, like nothing on earth was familiar to him. He said it became a permanent part of his inner psyche after seeing this image. And of course, Chiral Sangye Dorje's just recently given Bhante the name Kabje Rinpoche Urgyen Sangharakshita. So Kabje means Lord of the Refuge. And of course, Rinpoche means greatly precious. So it shows how much respect they have for Bhante. He's called Kabje Rinpoche, Sangharakshita.
I was already acquainted with Kachu Rinpoche. So it was he who told me that Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche was in Kalimpong and that I should meet him. And later he told me that I should take the opportunity of asking him for initiation. He was a very great Lama and very widely respected by the Tibetan people. And Jamyang Khyentse said that when he gave me the 4 initiations, he had transmitted to me the essence of all the teachings and initiations which he himself had received.
Jamyang Khyentse commissioned a special tanka to be made with all the different teachers in it from the past, from both India and Tibet, which Jamyang Khyentse said he had condensed into that initiation everything that he had received. And I believe that Bhante was the only Westerner ever to receive initiation from Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche. So it's really quite special.
All the different teachers whom I met certainly did inspire me to practice the Dharma, whether in a more general way or in connection with the actual practices which they gave me.
As I think now, those days, about 2 years or something that I stayed with Sangharakshita, that are the most free and valuable part of my life, because I didn't have to fear anything. I was always looked after very well and cared. And Sangharakshita was never aggressive about anything. Even as a boy, I did so much of pranks maybe, but then he never bothered about it. And he was always like smiling. And whenever the visitors come to him, he always welcomed them. And that he's a very nice person, kind-hearted.
been to the Sukla Kang, the royal chapel here in Gangtok. At the back of the royal chapel there's this really wonderful room where Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche lived, and where his the main place where his relics are kept, and his Dakini, Kandrola, that's her name. She's stayed there ever since he died in 1959, and we were very lucky. In fact, we got in. Photography was not permitted. We got to meet Kandrola, even though there wasn't really a common language, and yes, it was really special. This is the Royal Chapel. This is where relics of Sariputra and Moggallana were kept. There's a very beautiful description in facing Mount Kanchenjunga of Mente here on that very special occasion.
So this is the